We are the Church of the Larger Fellowship, a Unitarian Universalist congregation with no geographical boundary, working toward creating a global spiritual community, rooted in profound love, which cultivates wonder, imagination, and the courage to act. Adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic has been difficult for many bricks and mortar congregations. Early on in the pandemic, we were in a unique position to assist many congregations with the transition. We hosted special episodes of The VUU, provided advice and counseling to religious professionals, and trained congregations for live streaming worship, all while providing robust online programming for our members. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine to our letter writing ministry, we have found ways to build connection and community even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison, and investing in innovative ministry. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and to fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship. We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode of The VUU. The VUU is a weekly Unitarian Universalist talk show discussing important faith-based topics from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural perspective. Every Thursday for the past 7 years, we have welcomed guests from every corner of the world. Our guests are writers, scholars, activists, and religious thought leaders who are shaping Unitarian Universalism and society for the 21st century and beyond. I hope today's show inspires you. Hope it builds your faith. Hope it gives you perspective to see the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message. Hi, welcome to The VUU. I'm Aisha Hauser, and I'm coming to you from Seattle, Washington. Very happy to be with you all. And before we introduce our amazing guests coming from Texas, let us say hello to our hosts. Christina, hello, how are you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Rivera. I'm coming to you from Central Virginia, and I'm excited to be with you all for this, my first episode of The VUU. I missed you all last week. But I was on vacation, which was fabulous, taking my kids, one of my kids back to college where the other one already was, and visiting some folks that we didn't get to visit because of COVID. So we just kind of went to their general area and visited them through their big bay window in their yards. That was a little hard, but you know, such is our life in these pandemic times. And it was a privilege just to be able to travel a little bit in the car and see some different folks. Michael, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Michael Tino here, joining you from Peekskill, New York, just a little north of New York City in the Hudson Valley. And I'm doing okay. It's good to have you back, Chris. I will not be here next week because I will be meeting with the Unitarian Universalist Association's Ministerial Fellowship Committee, the committee that invites people into relationship with our association as ministers. And so all of the people who are preparing for that, our hearts are with you today. Don Fortune, how are you?
I am well. I am here in South Jersey, and things are chugging along. The church year has opened, and we're trying to remember how to do worship in person again where I am. It's very strange. There's a lot more to it than I remember. So we're getting through. We're doing all the COVID protocols and barricades and all the masks and all the things, and it's super important to my people. So I think Christina Rivera is going to be taking the lead today, so I will hand it back to her.
Thanks, y'all. And as always, we have our fabulous Tanner Linden behind. Used to have them behind the chalice, but now they're just behind the scenes, helping us out, keeping us connected to you all. So please do give us your comments and feedback, and we will speak it onto the air for you as we are able, and answer questions as we're able. We always love that because, you know, we're just here doing the thing. It helps us to know what you all are thinking. So we are delighted to welcome our guests today. We wish it was under different circumstances, but we all know that, well, right, that was an assumption right there. Many of us know that there are just horrific challenges to abortion rights going on in Texas. This is not new for those folks that are fighting this in Texas, and we're very, very grateful for Reverend Aaron Walker and Reverend Erica Forbes to be with us today. Reverend Aaron Walker is the affiliated community minister with Wildflower Church, a Unitarian Universalist congregation in Austin. She's a board member for the Texas Unitarian Universalist Justice Ministry. Yay! Zumba teacher, activist, singer, songwriter, bassist, not the least of what she does, let me tell you, for the indie rock band Parker Woodland. She's also an original member of the Texas Handmade Arts Activists for Reproductive Justice, which you've probably seen images of come up through social media and the news. You can learn more about her ministry and music at aaronwalker.com. And we're particularly delighted that Reverend Erica Forbes joins us. She's a licensed ordained interfaith minister and is the faith and outreach minister. Sorry, sorry, I'll get there. And is the faith and outreach manager at Texas Freedom Network with Just Texas, which is a fabulous organization. She's a licensed spiritual counselor and maintains a private clients with a focus on reproductive choice, yay, health, and justice. She's a lead facilitator, moderator, and speaker on the subjects that stand at the intersection of emotional justice, interfaith spirituality, and reproductive freedom. So crucial. Thank you for doing that work. She's currently working on a book with supporting coursework on reproductive freedom, justice, and spirituality for 20-somethings called Free God, Taking God Back from the Hostage Situation of the Conservatives. Bless you for that work. It is so needed. Thank you both for being here. And I'll just start out with, can you tell us what it's like on the ground, where you're at, what you're experiencing, what you think people need to know with to come into this show?
Well, you want to go ahead and start? You saw how as you asked that question, Chris, I went like this. I think it's, worth just saying we are tired. For starters, we are resilient and we are tired.
That's so for real.
Mm-hmm, yes. And so I want to talk a little bit about how those two things intersect, but if you'd like us to give a little bit of a recap on where things are legally, I can do that. Or Reverend Erica, if you wanted to do that, I'm either way.
I think that would be helpful just to kind of set the ground for folks that are, coming into this and have kind of heard that there's stuff going on. Some people are more tuned in than others. And so I think it'd be helpful just to get caught up.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, so what I'll do, if it's okay with Reverend Erica, I reached out to one of the abortion funds here in Texas that is doing the work, and they shared kind of an overview of where we are up to date. And I know Reverend Erica is really involved as well with Texas Freedom Network, so she can jump in and add more and all of that. So what our friends at the Lilith Fund are sharing with us is that Senate Bill 8, which bans abortion as early as 6 weeks and allows any person to sue a person or organization that provides abortion care or helps someone obtain an abortion after 6 weeks in Texas, is in effect. The Supreme Court declined to stop the law from going into effect, and this goes against 50 years of precedent with Roe v. Wade and almost 30 years with Planned Parenthood versus Casey. And something to know is that, you know, this is a very unpopular law with Texans. It's the most extreme anti-abortion law in the country. And so we want everyone who's been thinking about us, praying for us, to know that Texas is a very diverse state and that this is not something that everybody in Texas wants or has asked for. There have been multiple lawsuits that are filed and temporary restraining orders. And so the fight is on. And we can certainly get into that more. One key point that they want Texans to know and everyone to know is that people receiving abortion care themselves are not the ones that are subject to being sued in this law. So to put folks' mind at ease a little bit about that. And I'll turn it over to Reverend Erica and let her add some. I don't want to dominate.
Sure. Something that's particularly unique that people from all over the country are watching is what they call sort of a bounty hunter law, which is, in essence, if you aid or abet someone who is seeking to have an abortion, you can be sued for up to $10,000. And so what that means for me as a clergy and the work that I do, which is to support people who have to make the choice of whether to continue a pregnancy or have an abortion, is that if I was to drive someone to a clinic, if I was to sit and listen to them make their decision, not advise, but make their decision, I would be sued. If I was to hold someone's hand and offer pastoral, compassionate care after the fact, I will be sued. This is particularly unusual. It's also a tactic that is just unprecedented. And what it means also is that no matter what kind of care as a clergy member you offer, whether that is a text message support, because many teams that I work with use text messaging as a way to get support, or whether I drive someone to Albuquerque, I will be sued. And so this is it's particularly against the vows that I took as a clergy member, and really any clergy member of any of the world's religions has taken, to provide care for the least of these, to be sued for it. So that's something that I think is a very critical thing to understand and know.
Particular question around that, because there's some misunderstanding out there that when you say you can be sued and we can be sued, because it's not just people in Texas that can be sued. They can reach out to sue other people from other states. Typically, when we think about breaking the law, we think it will be the police coming, after us, or law enforcement coming after us. What's different about this enforcement?
Well, it's a civil suit, so I will be personally sued. So
It sounds like it's not being forced by the police, so just like some random neighbor.
Yes. I think that's the really, really important part. Well, one of the really important parts for folks to understand is that this has just broadened this ability to, to the idea that your neighbor can sue you over providing pastoral care is just, is just, for us, yeah.
So I mean, if I had savings, that would be gone. Anything that had anything to do with it's a personal suit, so it's a civil suit, and it can be anyone. So if I was to help a teen, then if their parent found out or their cousin found out and they lived in Montana, they could sue.
Right. And so it's really it's an isolation tactic. It's a tactic to try and isolate the folks who need this care, and make it so that everybody else around them, has a fear of doing what we know we need to do.
Right. And so one of the things is that since I do provide counseling, I'm one of the plaintiffs in the SB 8 lawsuit. And so because I'm committed as a sacred vow to continue to support a woman's right to choose. And so at midnight, when I was getting, as soon as the law went into effect, and I was getting text messages and calls about, from girls 16 years old saying, how will I get out of this state? I couldn't even figure out how to get the bus to the clinic. So those are the real stories.
I mean, it's beyond insidious and horrific that what's being put in place is this expansion of the police state and policing people with uteruses. It's genuinely beyond even just saying abortion is illegal past 6 weeks and you will be personally. It's just just crafting this cruelty is beyond my comprehension. So it seems to me, first of all, it's an untenable law. I mean, it almost feels like we should ordain everybody and everybody almost blood, because then, I mean, it feels like one tactic could be just everybody who's a faith leader, youth advisor, who, is part of wanting people to be held and cared for, just give advice. Everybody give abortion advice to everybody with a uterus, and then flood the courts with lawsuits. I mean, it feels like it's just so. It's almost, they know it's untenable and it's meant to scare. And now other states are going to try different red states, to be clear, and different ways to do this. And so my question to you both, Erin and Erica, is what are the on the ground tactics that you all are doing to support the people with uteruses who need the help and support, and B, I know there's lawsuits, and what are practically what's happening? I know I'm on TikTok and there's all kinds of social media. Here's how you get pills. Well, somebody from an international organization is sending abortion pills. So what are some other tactics that you both are engaged in to help?
Yeah. Well, and I want to say on what's on my heart about the whole thing is, like you said, scare tactic, but shaming, and that your neighbors, it just feels like a further exacerbation of the divisions of this country that have been there but gotten so much worse in recent years, and so that just kind of eats at my heart. But what I would say that from a UU perspective, when things happen, with the Black Lives Matter movement or racial justice, or when things happen in any number of areas, there's this desire often in many UUs, like, we need to create something, we need to do something, we need to help. And one of the things here in Texas that we want to share with everyone is that there are amazing, dedicated, long-time expert grassroots organizations on the ground. There's a list that I'll be happy to share, and I might put it in the chat for y'all, and we can share however you'd like later. But these abortion funds that where folks are trained on how to support, the travel, the housing, things like that, if people need it. They're not asking people to take this upon themselves at an individual level. And Reverend Erica may be hearing different things from TFN or other groups, but from a lot of those funds, they're asking, there's a lot of need for money because there's a lot of additional requests from folks from these different funds to help them do this safely. And that we really are asking folks to as you're doing, kind of defer to what's going on locally and try not to kind of lean into further scare tactics, right? Like the coat hanger images or the handmaids. We can speak later. I included the handmaids in my bio because I'd like to speak to how that group has, you know, what's gone on and sort of the ways that that's helpful and not helpful. We can kind of get into later, but yeah, supporting these funds and organizations that are, you know, fighting it on the ground and have been for such a long time. It's a piece of a long fight.
Aaron, is that we need you to support the funds, the abortion funds. They need the help and support now more than ever. And to understand that this law, the impact of it is directly on women of color. And it is critical for women of color because as a woman who has had 2 abortions myself and I speak very frankly and very openly about that, the economic impact of not being able to terminate a pregnancy is devastating. I had a time when I did have a pregnancy that I carried to term. I have a daughter. And had I not had the 2 abortions prior, I would not have been able to finish school. As it was, I spent some time in a homeless shelter with my daughter. And so the economic impact, the ability to create a life for ourselves is, it's almost becomes non-existent. And so this is something that is very critical for people of faith to understand, that this disproportionately impacts women of color, people with uteruses of color, because the economic impact and the psychological impact that this has on not being able to get relief, to have the abortion that you need so that you can continue your life in a way that allows for agency and autonomy is crucial. It's crucial.
What you're sharing, and I appreciate it so much, but it just that larger framework of conservative, you know, laws that we are being bombarded with in Texas and that are just part of a full white supremacy slate. You know, they're grasping to continue.
Well, another example of that is someone asked from our audience if this is similar to people suing people on boards of directors. Boards of directors, people on those boards are protected. Not in the way that this law, I mean, it sounds like this law is not protecting anybody. It's saying anybody, when you're on a board, there is I believe, and I don't know the name of it, but there are protections for folks on boards to not be sued personally. So actually, it sounds like this Texas law, again, it's horrific, cruel, insidious, because it's just meant to, yeah, as everyone already said. So my understanding, and you both can correct me, is it actually, there are laws to protect people who serve on boards, and this is not that.
Yeah. Another thing that our partners in the funds have asked us to share with y'all is that Texans are not particularly asking for a boycott. That refusing to travel to Texas has really no bearing on our governor, Greg Abbott, and the folks who have architected SB 8, but that it does negatively impact our workers in the service industry and tourism industries, most of whom are Texans of color, and including undocumented Texans and low-income Texans. And so we appreciate the interest and support, but that idea of a boycott is not particularly what folks on the ground are asking for right now.
We're talking about that support. We have heard of some employers, large employers in Texas, or national employers with employees in Texas who have actually come out and said, if you need to move, we will help you to make that possible. Is that kind of corporate support, maybe from employers, something that's being asked for, or is it helpful because it's a great PR move for them, but I'm just wondering if it's actually something that's been asked for, or And maybe it has, and maybe it is. I would love to think that somebody would be like, yeah, get me the hell out, and this is my opportunity. So I was just curious about that.
Reverend Erica, have you heard?
Well, quite frankly, we still need Texans to stay in Texas, and to be able to help people move. If they want to move, that's fine. But quite frankly, we need corporations to put pressure on in a political way, and to help by donating to the funds, and to make sure that the people that need the help the most get it, versus leaving the state, which impacts the economics of the state.
I think about how that impacts people in different class situations differently too, right? Because, if you're a professional and your family lives somewhere else and you've moved to Texas to take a professional level job, like you can say, okay, well, fine, help me move to whatever, New Mexico or California or whatever. But like, you are a Texan and a working class Texan, and your family are working class folks who all live there or close by. I mean, are they going to move like your grandma to? Right. Probably not, right?
Yeah.
So, we're asking people to choose to move away from their networks of support, their communities of faith, their families, and that lands differently on people in different class situations too. Like, it's really nice if you're like an executive vice president of a whatever. I don't even know what companies are doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's the same thing we go through with the national elections, right? Like the gut reaction to want to flee the U.S. when Trump became president. But the fact of the matter is, we need people with resources to be engaged in the work where we are. I'm a native Texan, fourth generation, and as much as it disturbs me what's going on, this is my home, and so fighting for that that's the way I can go, the way I feel I need to go. I'm called to go. So we can't just leave people.
Uber have contributed $1 million to fund if any of their drivers that do give rides, they will fund their lawyers' fees. Now that makes sense, because what they're doing is saying, we recognize there's a problem. We're here to support you so that you're protected in the event something happens.
I have a dear colleague who lives near me in South Jersey, and he's from Texas. And he is this delightful, fabulous, sparkly, campy gay man who has been fielding a lot of questions lately that generally boil down to, what the hell is it with Texas?
Uh-huh.
And what he said to me was, it seems to be that because of the way the districts were drawn, that the rural portions of the state, have I frozen up? I've frozen up. No. The rural portions of the state are disproportionately represented in the state government, in the legislature, in the Senate. And so the urban areas, which are progressive, which are liberal, which have, I looking for words that won't be offensive and I can't find them, but but that support abortion access and education and, understand that science is real and climate change is happening. Like, those parts of the state, even though they're the largest population base, don't have the kind of representation in Austin that that the more conservative parts of the state have. Is that accurate? And is Austin the right place?
You're accurate on Austin, and I will say gerrymandering in Texas is very very real and powerful. So if you look at our who represents you where maps, it's like just wiggles and squiggles. So that's a real problem. I will also say though that rural areas of Texas are pretty diverse too. I'm in a rural spot now, and I see almost more certainly racial diversity there than I sometimes see in Austin, where gentrification has made it so expensive to live there. So it's complicated, but you're absolutely right that the way our legislative lines are drawn, you know, it doesn't actually do justice to how progressive a lot of Texas actually is.
Right.
And yeah, when I asked our friends at the Lilith Fund, you know, one of the things that they said along with your question, Reverend Dawn, is just that for everyone, wherever they can, to reiterate sort of solidarity and empathy for Texas, because this is not what most Texans want. And again, we are a large and diverse state. And so just trying to please keep that reality, tell that truth to folks wherever you can.
Last week, when we mentioned that you all were coming, we were excited. We were given sort of the season preview of things happening on the VUU this fall. Someone asked in the chat that basically put something in our responses that they were under the impression that the federal government was going to stop this. And I know that the Justice Department is suing. And I know that yesterday the judge said that they'd rule on an injunction in 2 weeks or something. So like, yeah, sure, let's let this be in effect for 2 more weeks before we even have an injunction. But what do you see happening on that front? And either the suits that you're a part of or help from the federal government. I mean, I know the federal government is...
Yeah, there's no real way of knowing. We thought the Supreme Court did just a lot of things that we thought and have not happened. So at this point, what we have to do is continue to file the suits, file the temporary restraining orders, and wait for those verdicts.
Federal response is only as good as the Supreme Court, which right now, not so great. And
we're seeing the impacts of the 2016 election.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we've talked about, we knew would be a potential.
Yeah. And if I could just say a word of appreciation for you, Reverend Erica, and everyone who's involved in those legal challenges. You know, this is our same, you know, legislators and governor who didn't want to require and doesn't require masks for our children, even though we're in stage 5 here in Austin, for example. And, you know, we heard from people at first, our school districts weren't fighting that anti-mask mandate, and, you know, out of fear of being sued. And as parents, we were saying, like, do it, let him sue you, you know, like, let's not just take these bullying tactics. And so I just want to appreciate again, like, everybody who is not just going, well, you know, like, no, we have people who are really fighting in various ways, but you know, that's what our legal system is for at this point, and we can't stand for it. And that comes back to also, we're tired, and we shouldn't have to be this level of resilient, right? You know, Texas went through the storm and those freezes. You know, our leadership has been failing us in quite a few different ways. So there's a lot of fatigue, but I just, you know, we've got great people here, great people doing the work. And so I'm trying to have faith in that, as hard as it can be.
I do want to ask for you to touch on the Handmaid's Tale activism, so to speak, because I imagine that there has been a lot of learnings from, hopefully, I'm going to take the leap that you are going to speak to learning from Black women, Black trans women, about the problematic kind of centering of the Handmaid's Tale.
Yep. So the time that I was on the show before was when the Handmaid's Arts activism was just getting started. And At the time, I think we thought it was going to be maybe one or two actions, right, to draw attention to what was going on, you know, from the same agenda a few years ago. And so I was in the first several actions at the Texas Capitol, and we received feedback from Black activists and activists of color that this group, as it continued, you know, was taking up a lot of space, and most importantly, that this kind of, you know, acting predominantly, which was of course predominantly white female activists at the time, was making comparisons to things that really happened and continue to happen, particularly to Black women, people of color, and that so this kind of imagery of white women in the handmaids outfits gave that telegraphed that now this matters because it's happening to white women. And so I stepped back from the group publicly because of that, you know, shortly after we started having those conversations. Folks do still, there are still some folks who are doing that. And there was a range of diversity in the group in different ways. But for me, the center of it was, once you receive that feedback and you hear that feedback from Black women, Black activists, people of color, it's central to my call to ministry around anti-racism that I receive that feedback and make a change. So I haven't been involved with that since shortly after that episode of The VUU that we did. And that was something that the funds asked us to highlight, that really using that Handmaid's Tale imagery, the dystopian imagery, that language is not helpful. And really, we need to be drawing attention to the fact that these laws are part of white supremacy culture.
So we have a comment from a viewer, Pamela, one of our CLF members who lives in Texas, says that she hopes people show up for Texas like they did for the Georgia Senate runoffs. If that were to happen, what would that mean practically for you all? Like how would you want people to show up in those numbers, with that force?
Well, it's critical, and we want, I mean, there's marches, obviously, October 2nd, there's going to be a march in Austin, rally, you know, wherever we have to bring the attention everywhere we possibly can. And so we want people showing up in force is at this point exactly what we need, because this is the alarm. This is not a dress rehearsal at this point, because we know that other states are watching. They're already drafting. I mean, they have a blueprint. And so if we don't fight with every single ounce of strength that we have, we're going to start seeing this in other states. Make no mistake.
Like South Dakota, the governor like Xerox Texas's law and introduced it to the legislature. Yeah. So yeah, they're like, okay, Texas got it. We'll just do it. That's the exact same law.
Yeah, and with that in mind, another thing I would think would be helpful is just to really get involved where you live with the funds and the activism that's already on the ground where you live. I mean, we would love your support in the ways that folks have asked for it for Texas. But, as a board member of the Texas UU Justice Ministry, I think, suggesting for UUs, check in with your state justice ministries or even the justice team of your congregation. What can you do at your grassroots congregational or state level? Because as Reverend Erica wisely says, it's coming your way too, unfortunately.
Well, I did want to give you all the opportunity to talk a little bit about, when we kind of opened the conversation, you talked about how tiring it is and the resilience that we're having to, is it resilience if it's no choice? You don't have a choice in it. I always wonder about that. I'm like, yes, we're resilient, but I've got no other choice but to be. So what is that? I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that from also a human care standpoint, because to continue to do this work, what
Right.
what do you all need?
Yeah. Well, I will say there's a couple of things that I think about that may be a little bit different narrative, and that is my ancestors. I am benefiting from the work that my aunts and grandparents did. I was able to have the 2 abortions. And had they been tired, and I'm sure times when they were fighting, they were tired, but had they just said, I'm tired and I can't do this, I would not benefit. I would not have been able to finish school. I would not have been able to have any kind of life. So for me, as a Black woman, there is a certain level of obligation that the fight that I have in me is not for me. The fight that I have for me is for my daughter's children when she has them, and for your grandchildren. That there is a certain level of obligation and duty, and there is a deep reserve that I know that everyone that has ancestors that have fought for justice in any way, shape, or form, which we all have, has. And so now's the time to recognize, I mean, I know that in popular society, we understand that we get tired and we get worn out and self-care is important. Absolutely, no doubt. But I also want to continue to say there is the space, there is a deep inner reserve that we can tap into for such a time as this. When I had an opportunity to march 3 days with Dr. Barber and, at his age, or when King was marching, I mean, obviously, fatigue is real. So, but I want to say that you can be tired, you can rest, and then get back up and get in the fight, because there is no other option. And so I want to continue to speak to the narrative of understanding fatigue and giving space for that, but that there's something greater at work here that we must all be part of. We have no other choice. And so I guess that's probably where I land on it. And believe me, the last 3 weeks have been unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life. And I'm 50. But there's no other option for me. There's no other option for those girls or those people with uteruses that are scared.
Yeah, and I think that's so important right now, because, particularly I would just speak to it from our faith perspective, is I'm hearing a lot of exhaustion, and pushback of, there's only so many things I can deal with, and my response being, totally get that, and you can't just set down somebody else's liberation. Like that, you can take a pause, you can take a rest, but you cannot abdicate our spiritual mandate, our foundational theological mandate as Unitarian Universalists, to put down somebody else's liberation. It's just not consistent with what we hold as sacred.
Absolutely. And this is where I come back to community and joy practices. That one, I think sometimes white supremacy, for those of us who are white, has, insidiously ingrained in us that we're supposed to be able to fix anything. We're supposed to have the answers. That's what that word supremacy, has taught us, which is false, obviously, deeply, deeply false. And so none of us are going to fix this. Not even together in our lifetime are we going to solve all the things. But we're part of a community, a faith community, a call that we take part in it, and that we trust that we do our part and someone else is doing their part, and we're encouraging everyone to do their parts. And for me, the ebb and flow of spirit is really important. That listening to your body, knowing when to push and when to take a nap, leaning into your joy practices. You know, I told the group I did Zumba before I got on this call. So, you know, finding those practices, the prayer, the dance, the music, whatever it may be that sustain you, like Reverend Erica said, to keep going. We cannot afford despair.
And we have been uniquely designed for such a time as this. I would like for us to, as humans, begin to think of ourselves not as superhuman in that way in which we don't get run down, but that there's a design at play here for us to be able to handle what is coming our way. And I would love for us to be able to tap into that from a humanistic standpoint.
Absolutely.
Yes, amen. Then yes, let's do that. Let's all do that together. Absolutely. Well, as we come, I was just going to say, as we come to the top of our hour, we've got about 7 more minutes before we're going to close our show out. Is there anything that you all feel like that our listeners need to know, you know, hasn't been spoken into this space yet? And we definitely want to give that opportunity.
I would also like to say, think about the clergy that are on the front lines. I mean, at this point, there are going to be quite a few clergy that are going to be doing real work on the ground. And if there is any way, whether they're part of your church, your religious fellowship, or someone else's, think about them and how you can support them, because they're going to need it.
One of the things that came up in the clergy meeting that I was in last week about this is also that, you know, while we're focused on being of support to folks who might need an abortion now, also that this is so re-traumatizing for elders, or can be, I won't assume, but for some folks who have labored hard for Roe v. Wade or for the strides that were made. And so the pain of seeing this moment as well. And so for myself, my ministry used to be with the YMCA. And one of the things I loved about that was that it was a very intergenerational community. And so I would just encourage folks to check in and reach out across generations to the ones that you love, and to folks who particularly might be isolated, but just might be affected by this in different ways. And then in terms of support, I highly, highly recommend Reverend Erica's organization, the Texas Freedom Network, that folks look up the good work that they're doing across, you know, intersectional justice work that they do. And then I have a list of these funds, but I would just say, if you look on Twitter or Facebook for example, the Lilith Fund or Jane's Due Process, the Frontera Fund, a lot of these funds do a great job of lifting each other up. If you go and you look on their Twitter, you'll see all of their links and things to follow. So if you start, yes, Just Texas, if you start with 1 or 2 of those, you'll be able to find a good list.
Right. I would love to speak about the Just Texas program, which is the program that I am a part of within Texas Freedom Network, where we have been working for the last 6 years to create and craft a congregation designation that has 3 principles. And those 3 principles are that we are committed to respecting and trusting women, that women will not be shamed, stigmatized, or judged for their choices around their reproductive health, including abortion, and that health care is a moral and social good. These 3 principles are part of a designation that then there are ways in which congregations can live that out. And so we as a nonprofit could utilize funds to continue this work. We've been crisscrossing the state for the last 6 years, getting churches to be part of the reproductive freedom congregation designation, first of its kind in the country, much like LGBTQ affirming congregations were. This is that same type of thing that then became a voice that was part of a movement. And there is the potential that this designation will become national. And so we will become one voice for justice with those committed principles. So any donations to Just Texas would make a huge impact on the work that we're trying to do for all women across all faiths. So that's something that's important to, I wanted to amplify and lift up as well.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for that. And it is a beautiful thing that I've seen with the cross support of the organizations in Texas. It's just been just a gorgeous way of showing that collaborative spirit and that community spirit. Like, you know, it's definitely feels like it's coming from a place of abundance and not scarcity of just, we know we have what we need to do this. It's out there. We just need to all get connected and plugged in and make it happen. So that's definitely something that I've felt come from what you all are doing. So thank you.
Thank you. And may I just plug the Texas Youth Justice Ministry
please.
One more time as well, because we want congregations to have support. Thank you, Chris. It's been hard, I think, in the pandemic for smaller congregations. I mean, all congregations, it's a hard time, right? And so the Texas UU Justice Ministry, like state justice ministries, is a chance for support and collaboration and connection for UUs of sizes of congregations, and in particular in this time. So any support for your state justice ministry, including the Texas UU Justice Ministry, will be greatly appreciated as well.
Thank you. Thanks for speaking that into the room. We appreciate you all taking the time to come out and help us all get centered around this. I can imagine that it will be something that we would invite you back for, because we are all in this for the long haul together. So we appreciate you, Reverend Erica and Reverend Aaron. And thanks to all of our steady VUU viewers. Bring a friend, tell somebody about it, and be on the lookout for us next week when we come back to you. Take care. Have a great one. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit CLFUU.org/give for more information. We hope you will join us next week for another episode of The VUU.